been saying, I think we got two really good quarterbacks, two starting quarterbacks, two championship quarterbacks. And
we love them both. We love them both. We love them both.
Hello, everybody, and good afternoon, and welcome in to the Maize and Blue Reviews. Good afternoon, Michigan football. I'm Dennis Fithian, and we are ready to go on this Wednesday, the 14th. Thanks for joining us. That was Jim Harbaugh at the outset, and if you've heard Jim Harbaugh over the last couple of days, and I think even the last couple of weeks, he's talked about how he likes both of his quarterbacks, both of his starting quarterbacks. He's got two. They're really embracing that. One of the things that we are going to be talking about today when it comes to Michigan is the quarterback position. We know that Michigan has settled on J.J. McCarthy. Settled on is probably not the right word. J.J. McCarthy won the job after the two-game showdown at the beginning of the season. McCarthy will start again coming up against UConn this Saturday, and is likely going to be the starter for the rest of the year for Michigan. We're going to talk about that process and how Michigan got to where they are at. What else are we going to talk about? Well, we'll look. Here we are, hump day, and we are now into the football season. We're coming up to week 3. We will skip ahead to Saturday and get a quick look at what's to watch for on Saturday, which does include Michigan at noon. Also, we'll get into Jaydn Davis, who was in Ann Arbor this past weekend, where Michigan sits, why it's so important. I think most people know that, but we'll get into the outstanding quarterback that Michigan really wants out of Providence Day in Charlotte, North Carolina. But we'll start with the quarterback plan for Jim Harbaugh, and it has been talked about. You may have noticed, you may have listened to other people that are talking sports, in particular college football, specifically Michigan. Everybody has an opinion on how this played out. If you just are going to the basics, you can just say, look, Michigan had, I already mentioned it, a 2-game tryout, a 2-game showdown where they had the starter from last year start game 1, then they had the young buck McCarthy start game 2, and then it was clear to everyone, there's no dispute about that on what we watched over the first 2 games on who was better, who was more deserving based on those 2 games. And J.J. McCarthy emerged out of those 2 games. But there's a lot of people that are wondering just how this process went. And it was Jim Harbaugh, everything above board. Is Michigan doing the right thing? All kinds of different things when it comes down to it. In one, sometimes you might not like it, but you get somebody who is not a Michigan fan and is a fan of Michigan State or Ohio State, who are, going to say things like, this is, Harbaugh doing stupid things, or, Harbaugh had some kind of devious plan here. Michigan's, doesn't have any idea what they're doing. Is it going to blow up in their face? You understand rivals doing that. You also understand, even on a national level, not, the people that are not Michigan fans that may consider themselves, students or, I don't know, entertainers in college football. They're going to be drawn to this. I mean, people are drawn anyways to Michigan, to Harbaugh, to quarterbacks. And, coming up with an opinion like, wow, Harbaugh did something a little unconventional, but man, this guy hit it right on the mark. There may have been a few people that had said that, but you also know that people are going to come up with their opinions, and they might say something that you're like, well, this guy really doesn't know what he's talking about, or this girl. But let's get to some of that and just analyze it. One, there's a writer for the USA Today, and this young lady works for the Big Ten Network, and she is a Michigan grad. I can recall going down to a few basketball press conferences back in the day, and Nicole Auerbach was there, and she tweeted a couple days ago about Michigan and their quarterback competition. And here's what Nicole Auerbach had to say. There's some people that are listening just via the podcast after the fact. Of course, those of you that are out there watching right now, we'll get your feedback up on the screen and we'll discuss what you're saying in real time and what your opinion about all of this is. So sit tight because we will get to that coming up. But here's what Auerbach had to say. She said the only reason for Jim Harbaugh to do what he did was to set it up for JJ to win the job. 2 weeks of additional public data points to explain why it's him. If he wanted Cade to be the starter, Cade would already be the guy. Would have been handled totally different. Well, this is a real doozy from Auerbach in having her opinion. It's fine that she is saying what she's saying, but let's look at it a little bit closer and see if we all agree with Nicole. I'll go to the back half of her point, and I will agree with what she has to say. Auerbach said, if Harbaugh wanted Cade to be the starter, Cade would already be the guy. Would have been handled totally different. I think there's a point there. If Jim Harbaugh, after spring and after the summer phase and into fall camp, the 3-week competition, and going into game week, if he would have looked at it and said, and talked to all of his coaches and said, we really think Cade is going to be the best guy for us under center. Let's just go ahead with Cade. So, yeah, I'll agree with that part. If Harbaugh wanted McNamara and he felt really good about McNamara being the starter all year long, he would have handled it totally different. Now, the top half of this, where she says the only reason Harbaugh did what he did, the only reason Harbaugh did what he ended up doing was to set it up for JJ to win the job. Maybe Harbaugh thought that he's got a really talented quarterback, and this is the way that he would put it on display for everyone to see. And when McCarthy won it, his plan worked perfectly. This is what he wanted all along. He may have wanted this all along. He may have suspected this was going to be how it played out. But, we all watched these first 2 games, and the competition, which is part of it, we all knew wasn't going to be very good heading into the season. I think that played a part. These first 3 games were going to be so easy for Michigan that, Michigan could have played anybody, and they were going to win these games. So it was about, these were, say glorified practices or scrimmages, or it's like the NFL preseason. There's some truth to all of that. But there was a version of this where Cade McNamara came out against Colorado State, and Cade McNamara played well. He came out and actually threw the ball to Cornelius Johnson on that first pass play and hit him. And when he came out and then had another pass and threw to the other side, then he zipped it over there. See the motion that I'm using? For those of you not watching, I'm kind of slinging it on the side. That instead of the ball going, 4 yards high to Johnson on that first series, again, he threw it right, hit him right in the numbers. There's totally a chance that McNamara could have done that. And then later, there was another shot in the end zone where he threw behind Cornelius Johnson. And then, the all fell down on the one interception. But just those 3 passes there, it felt like even in the first quarter that the competition was over, even before we saw McNamara. I mean, before we saw McCarthy. But there was a chance that McNamara came out and played well, or played just, I guess played well. I was going to say decent. I mean, if you play decent and then McCarthy comes out and dazzles, it could have just been a JJ. But if Harbaugh really, his master plan was JJ will win this in front of everybody for sure, and this is just how he was going to do it. Was he planning on McNamara actually not playing well? Because McNamara didn't handle this competition well. He handled it terribly. He came out and I don't know, I say fell flat on his face. He kind of did do that, As I say, there's nothing against the kid. We're just evaluating how he threw the ball. If Cade was sitting here, Cade McNamara, and you take nothing away from him. This is a guy who, in Michigan football history, for as long as we live, you will look back and say there was this super long drought at the beginning of the 21st century, and Michigan had gone almost 20 years, 17 years, and then they finally, got over the hump and won the Big Ten and made it to the college football playoff. Their quarterback was Cade McNamara. You never take that away from him. And then the following year, he was named captain. So you don't have to take anything away from Cade. He's got that, and he will always have that. But the truth is, if we're just looking at the two games, he didn't play well. We saw that. And just going back to Nicole for a moment, she says that, he did what he did to set up JJ to win the job. I think that if that was the case, and it might be, but there was a chance that McNamara played well in these first two games. So then where was Jim Harbaugh going to be at then? Because Jim Harbaugh, when he came out and we're talking about what he said on the home podcast going into game week, he had these 3 points about the competition, and that's when he announced that he was going to have, the Harbaugh plan, game 1, Cade, game 2, JJ. When he announced that after the 3 weeks of fall camp, he said, McNamara is a better passer. McCarthy's a better playmaker. And then they got to the third point, the field general and everything else. And he said, but it's so even there. But then he said, Cade's just slightly better. That's how he put it. If you're setting this competition up, that third point, you could say, hey, McNamara's a better passer. JJ makes more plays. You get maybe the game manager, the game breaker. But then when it came to the field general, you say, that's when we're going to find out because these guys are in a dead heat. He didn't say that. He said McCarthy or the McNamara had the slight lead. That wasn't setting this up for JJ to win the job. Why would he lie about McNamara being in the lead? So that's the part that that gives me pause. Now, I think it's all of these things. People want to give up their point. We'll see what other people's point is, but a lot of people just want to say, oh, it's just one thing. And if you wanted to crystallize it, or if I wanted to crystallize it into one thing, I think Jim Harbaugh sat down and said, who is the best quarterback for Michigan for this season? And whether it's deep down or whether he just sat back and said, I think that McCarthy is a better quarterback. So how do I go about doing this? Well, we'll have the competition and we'll let it play out. And I suspect, this is me talking about Jim Harbaugh, that McCarthy will win it. Is that okay? Is that okay for you as a Michigan fan? Is that okay for you as a college football fan? I would say that that should be okay. And unless you're, the McNamara's family, then you can say, oh, you should just go with Cade. He won you the Big Ten. I understand your point, if you're McNamara's family, but in sports, in college football, you hear this all the time, that the competition's ongoing and that, you're one snap away, from an injury, but certainly you can also, with the competition, that you have to go out every day and, hold on to that job. If you got somebody breathing down your neck, you realize that somebody can take your spot. And this is what was going on. Now, I think it's a little bit multi-layered here because you do have the intangible part of McNamara. And is there a part where people, I've talked about him, he doesn't have to, they always say, this guy's never going to have to buy a drink in his life again after what he did last year. There's part of that, whether you say he's beloved or, he certainly is loved, And certainly, if you're a Michigan fan, you credit him, and you're really happy for the performance that he put in last year. So there's going to be some feelings about that heading into this year. And so if you're Harbaugh and you know that this was the guy that started for you, that got you over the hump, where Michigan was finally able to beat Ohio State, where Michigan was finally able to get to Indianapolis, where Michigan was finally able to get to the college football playoff, that's something that you don't just throw into the trash, that you don't come out of fall camp and say, yeah, nobody else saw it. And even though the reports were that McNamara had a really nice fall camp, we're just going with JJ. No, they're gonna put it out there because they have this additional chance to compete, because they do have. You can't come out and say, man, we got such an easy September schedule. We're kind of forced to go ahead and pick somebody right now. They didn't have that. I think that because McCarthy didn't have a spring was a blessing in disguise for Michigan, because if McCarthy was able to compete in the spring, there's a very good chance that he would have taken down McNamara. Remember, McNamara he didn't look all that hot in the spring game. If we just say that the spring game would have played out like, I don't know, the first game. Spring game, you got the competition. McNamara wasn't very good in the spring game. He misfired on his first pass down the field to Cornelius Johnson. Really didn't move the ball, and wasn't all that hot. Didn't move the team. Didn't come away with any points. Wasn't all that good. Not only 7 throws, but whatever. And was there a chance that McCarthy could have came out there and threw the ball all over the place and ran a little bit and looked great, and everybody was like, McCarthy's going to win this job? Yes, there's a very good chance that could have happened. And let's just say that Harbaugh didn't come up with his plan for the game 1 and game 2, that he just went into it, and instead of coming out with that plan, said, we're going to do what we did last year. We're going to have McNamara start, and then we're going to mix JJ in there. There was I think a very good chance that he could have done that. He didn't do that. We know that, but there's a chance. And if McNamara, and it played out exactly how it did in game 1, everybody would have been screaming all week long that they need to make the move, that they have to make the change. And then if McNamara would have started game 2, I don't know, maybe he would have come out and played really well, but McNamara didn't play well, even though it was against Hawaii. He didn't play well in that game. And I know he didn't get the great blocking, but it was the first team. But firing the ball down the field and throwing the pick like he did, whether he was feeling it or not, and whether you put additional pressure, that's important. Because even if you're the biggest McNamara fan, if you're in his family, or if you're that, super fan that loves him so much, you have to admit that the added pressure or whatever they did to him, he didn't perform his best in these 2 games. So I think it's and it usually is this case. We always try to make it nice and neat, like Auerbach was doing, like, oh, this is it. This was some kind of plan around the way. And I think that Harbaugh, he didn't have the spring. I think he thought that McCarthy was the better player for Michigan, but then you've got this proven commodity and this loved, let's say beloved incumbent, and they're pretty close to being neck and neck, whatever you're looking at, and put it out there in practice. And just guess what? The schedule has opened up all of September. There's been no pressure. Look at me. I'm sitting back here. Usually in September, when it comes to Michigan, you're biting our nails, like worried about, this game coming up. Oh my God, there's been nothing like that. Michigan is still on a free roll. Other teams have lost. Michigan's sitting up there, number 4 team in the country. This is just so relaxing and so easy if you're a Michigan fan so far. I mean, this is easy street. There's not a chance in the world that they're going to lose any of these games. Yeah, there's no pressure for you. You might want a little bit. You might actually look forward to a game that, like, and I see people debating. Oh my God, watch out for Maryland. Like, all right. I mean, so yeah, Maryland's going to be a big step up from UConn and Hawaii, but I expect Michigan to smash Maryland. Ooh, they got to go on the road to play the Hawkeyes. I don't know. Playing on the road, ask Nick Saban. Playing on the road is tough. Playing on the road in the Big Ten, difficult. Michigan hasn't won in Iowa City in a long time. I was at the game. Pat myself on the back. I don't know. It's just true. I took an RV back in the day to Iowa City and sat not in the press box. I sat on some bleachers with my feet on the grass in the end zone at Iowa City. A fun time to just sit there and, like, 20 feet away when they're getting down there. It's like, well, what a cool vantage point. I didn't think, if you told me Michigan's not going to win in nearly 20 years after that game, it could be tough. But who here really thinks that Michigan is going to lose that game? Should lose that game, will lose that game, could lose that game? Okay, could. Probably not. Man, this schedule that Michigan has was always part of the conversation of just how this sets up so nice for Harbaugh and company, for Michigan football and company. I have to add that. They've got a really nice team. They've got a really nice schedule. They're coming off a really nice season. The future is really bright. And if you're a Michigan football fan, just currently where you're at right now, this is one of the best spots in Michigan football history. There really is a chance that Michigan could win the Big Ten again. This is getting a little bit of ahead of ourselves for a second, but there is a chance. I just said a really good chance. I don't know. I'll take that back and say there's a nice opportunity because of the schedule and the team that Michigan has now with McCarthy as the starter, that they could go through this schedule. And it's crazy to talk about them going undefeated, but there's really, they're in with a chance to do that because of all the things that I've just talked about here for 20 minutes plus. And if they could figure out the name, image, and likeness and find their spot where they're able to appeal to the top recruits in the nation, and there's a chance that they're going to be able to do that. And I know people, myself included, wanted them to come out swinging for the fences with name, image, and likeness, and this was going to be a great equalizer for U of M, who, had to settle in a lot of spots when it came to college football recruiting because other teams were paying under the table, and Michigan didn't want to do that. And now that they can pay over the table, they still like, yeah, but that's not exactly, how you're supposed to do it. They got to figure that out. But that's not a huge leap. And we're going to talk about that coming up, but I'll give you a little tease. How much is a leap is it to think that Michigan could figure out name, image, and likeness? That's coming up as we talk to it. So let's get some of the feedback here. And then I've got I don't know if it's a real doozy, but it is something that we have discussed, that we have talked about, that Jim Harbaugh spoke to a former Wolverine, and what he had to say, I think, will be music to your ears. You can always, with the feedback, send a message in, and if not instantaneously, certainly throughout the broadcast, we will put your message up and we will discuss what you have to say as we go to the messages. This is EOTLAG. What's up? The idea about Harbaugh picking McCarthy, the plan Probably yes, to keep McNamara from transferring before the season started if he had announced McCarthy was the starter back then. Yeah, I think that coming out of spring, you're exactly right. If, we got to suppose that McCarthy actually was healthy and was competing for the job, but if McCarthy had won the job in spring, I think there's a chance, I'll say a very good chance, that Cade McNamara would have transferred. Don't you think that? If they competed and Michigan and Jim Harbaugh would have announced McCarthy was the starter out of spring, that McNamara would have gone elsewhere. I believe that McCarthy was injured and couldn't compete, and that McNamara was the guy. I don't think the week before the start of the season, where McNamara is announced captain, that Harbaugh sat there and said, this thing is very close. Let's announce that we're going to have a competition into the season, and that will keep Cade from transferring. I don't even think that played into it. I feel like if McNamara leaves immediately after being announced captain because he loses the job in fall camp, it doesn't do any good for him to go elsewhere. It's just like right now, there are a lot of people like, McNamara's going to hightail it out of here. He's out. He gone. Why? If he could go somewhere else and play, certainly. But he can't do that. He could go somewhere else, but he's not going to play. You could say he could get a start on next year, learning the playbook, and that's true. But if I'm Cade and this is where name, image, and likeness comes in, and I've made, he's a millionaire now from being at Michigan. I don't know how the NLI deal works and everything else for Cade, but he has done well. I mean, he was the freaking starting quarterback on Michigan's Big Ten championship team. He's made out. Remember, Tom Brady hooked him up. There's a lot of other businesses that have put their arm around Cade McNamara and said, you're our guy. It's very easy, to think about the money aspect and say, staying at Michigan, if you're Cade, is lucrative for him. Let's just say he was going to bolt because he, felt like he was done wrong, and he's going to head to Nevada. The casinos in Nevada are they going to hook Cade up? Or whoever else? What else? I don't know what else goes on in Nevada. The point here is that he wasn't leaving, I don't think. And I think people told him and gave him examples of plenty of QBs who started, lost their job, and then came in and ended up being big-time contributors to successful teams. Jalen Hurts is the greatest example. Just played the Lions this past Sunday, and we've gone through the history and how it worked with him in Tagovailoa and how it worked out wonderfully for Jalen Hurts. And look at him now. That's the biggest example. People have said it because it is one that you should realize if you're Cade. And if you missed it yesterday, Ryan Hayes, Michigan tackle, was asked about Cade. And I'll paraphrase it. I was going to put one of the tweets up about what he had to say, but here's the paraphrase that, he was asked about, what Cade is like now that, he's the backup. And Hayes said he's come in with a smile on his face, like there's no different. That's what you want to hear if you're a Michigan fan. Sure, you're disappointed at the outset. Sure, you come out after game one and you're like, thought I played well. I wasn't ready for all of this. And then Michigan fans jumping all over him. He's not acting like a Michigan man. Told everybody, give him a break. He'll be all right. He's all right. It looks like he's all right. All right, let's see what some others have to say about how this thing went down. The captain says things to look for this weekend. He wants inside running on offense. He wants pass protection better, outside contain on defense, not even worried about the passing offense. Yeah, I think all of those things are are right on, Captain. If we look at UConn, they are very similar to Hawaii and to Colorado State in that they are a doormat in college football, that Michigan can do anything they want and they can just pulverize UConn this week. And sure, like there's some fine tuning that you have to do when you go out there. And so all of those things that you're saying, I don't know, inside running on offense, I don't know, and I don't think that Michigan's going to have Donovan Edwards that they did in the first two games. There was no doubt that they were giving the ball to Edwards to run inside, and if he's not there, it's going to give an opportunity to somebody like, CJ Stokes. Maybe they'll have an orgy package to come in for some inside running. Maybe they give some of those other guys. I know Gash got some love this past Saturday. Maybe it'll be Tavier Dunlap. So I'm with you on that. Pass protection, even with some of the starters, the pass protection, working with the offensive line, how they have to work all together. And the more reps that they get and more practice, it's like being on, I don't know, Dancing with the Stars or being a dancer. That's how you get better as an offensive line. You dance together, you work together. So, yeah, I mean, all of those things, I think, we got to look for something, right? So, Captain, I think you're onto something there. Steven says Jaydn seems like a strong possibility. We'll get to Jaydn Davis coming up. And, I'm looking at Otis, who has a very clever series of a text coming over about Michigan and just giving a shout out. Steven thinks it was basically what most of us said when it was announced. It seems formatted for JJ to win out. Yeah, I don't know if it was formatted. That's the part again, Steven. I don't know about formatted. Harbaugh may have felt that he was going to win the job, but if he would have said, let's just give JJ the start in game one and let's give Cade the start in game two, do I think it would have been any different? I don't. Remember, I thought that, and then I didn't know exactly what the plan was going to be. I liked the plan when it was announced. But if they would have just gone to, let's sprinkle in McCarthy. Remember, he only had 11 snaps in game one. If he would have done it without announcing his plan, people have been screaming for McCarthy in game two. And the way Cade played in game two, I think this week we'd have had J.J. McCarthy getting his first start instead of last week. I don't think that's such a leap. And when you start talking about what everybody thought, and like people were excited because he was a backup. People were excited because he's a runner and a thrower. People were excited because of his high school credentials. I mean, all of those things make you excited about the backup quarterback in that he could potentially be better. And then we saw last year on display in just a limited amount, like, a lot of people were convinced, like, this guy's better. I myself, who, think that I'm very reasonable. I don't come out with super hot takes for, clickbait or any of these kind of things. I try to play it reasonable and study it and then give an opinion. I thought, because we make predictions. Have to, but we do. We make predictions in the off season. Right now, if you recall, my prediction was J.J. McCarthy will start for Michigan by October 1st. I didn't see many people coming in saying, oh, you're way out of line with that prediction. You're crazy. A lot of people had similar predictions. I adjusted my prediction a week before the start of the season when Harbaugh came out with his quarterback plan. When he said the game one, game two competition, when I saw that, I changed my prediction and said, I think that McCarthy will win the job and he will start by game three for the rest of the season. Now, yeah, I'm patting myself on the back. I mean, those aren't, I don't know if those are the greatest predictions ever. My greatest prediction ever right now might be that Roman Wilson in the offseason. When I said he was going to score the most touchdowns, or he was going to be the leading, he was going to catch the most touchdowns for Michigan this year. People were like, whoa, that's a loaded room. You're picking Roman Wilson? I'm like, yeah, I'm picking him. I at least feel good about that one right there. Bryant says, Nicole Auerbach is wrong. Harbaugh gave Cade every opportunity to win the job. Yeah, Bryant. That's right. He really did give him every opportunity. You could say he could have shut it down, and most coaches would have announced the starter because they didn't want to go into all this hoopla and drama into the season, regardless of who the opponents are. Yeah, there are probably a lot of coaches who have done that because they don't want to mess with team chemistry. They don't want to mess with the psyche of the quarterbacks. You are right. But are you doing the best for your football team? And part of it was going to be, I know there was a lot of Michigan fans who did not want to hear people about, oh my God, people are really freaking out and coming up with hot takes about this drama with the quarterbacks and what Harbaugh is doing. We knew that. Harbaugh knew that. Harbaugh does tend to, he has, because he was a pro coach, there are aspects about him where you think maybe he's running this a little bit too much like a professional team rather than a college team. This felt a little bit like that. It's like, this is different, but name, image, and likeness involved. There's a lot more. There's more. College and pro football have never been more alike than right now. The games, the style of play has married up with the run-pass options and the running quarterbacks. There's always been running quarterbacks in the NFL, but over the last 5 years, there have been a lot more. And a lot more of the systems that are running in college in the pro. That's true. There's no argument about that. 5 years, certainly 10 years ago, people were like, I don't want a running quarterback. They get hurt. I don't want a running quarterback. I want a quarterback to stand in the pocket and be able to throw the football. Now what you want, if you're in the pros, what do you want? You want a guy like J.J. McCarthy. You wanted a guy like Joe Milton, in theory. Big, strong, can throw the ball the length of the field, and also is athletic and can run. What we didn't know about Joe is that, we just didn't know about his, competition level, how much he wanted to compete. I don't know say what was inside, but he didn't seem like he had the toughness for the position. Guy looked like he could just run guys over, throw the ball to the moon. It didn't seem like he necessarily wanted that contact. You gotta enjoy the contact if you're a QB. Lyle, we'll take a few more. We'll get into what to watch for this weekend, and also Jaydn Davis. Lyle says, Nicole Auerbach is right. Jim has screwed up plenty of quarterback decisions. O'Korn over Peters, for example, Patterson, Milton, etc. Yeah, that's one thing about before this year that Harbaugh that was so frustrating for Michigan fans. It didn't seem like he got any of those right. Rudock, but I thought Shane Morris was going to win that job. I thought, and going with O'Korn and some of those starts like that home game against Michigan State. Remember how things have changed already in college football because you did have Nick Saban going with Tua. You did have down in Clemson with Dabo Swinney going with Trevor Lawrence as true freshman. I can recall, saying myself that I would go with Peters over O'Korn. I would go with Dylan McCaffrey, who was a true freshman over O'Korn. And I heard, people, commentators say, oh my God, a true freshman's not ready to play on the road. A true freshman's not ready to play in a rivalry game. Things have, and I get that because mostly in the history of college football, that's what people said. And coaches didn't do it. But then Sweeney and Saban changed it up. But yeah, no, I hear you what you're saying about Jim and the perceptions and whether like I said, I'm with you. It felt like that. Steven says that Cade McNamara certainly had every opportunity, but do you give it to Cade because JJ missed the spring? Yeah, I don't think you give it to anyone. And if Michigan, let's say that Michigan, it was last year's schedule where Michigan started with Western and then they had to play Washington. Would Harbaugh have done the same thing? Would he have said, we're going to go with Cade and we're going to go with McCarthy? I don't think so. I don't think he would have done that. He may have given McCarthy an opportunity. The point is, if you're playing a game where the competition is a little bit more, or in this case, what you would look at, let's just say a Power 5 conference, you're not going to have the Harbaugh plan. The schedule always played into it. The let's say it, easy schedule always played in. It gave Harbaugh an opportunity. Whether you like the schedule, whether you hate the schedule, whether whatever, it gave Michigan a chance to do a lot of things, especially with their QBs. Captain asking about the offensive line and are people worried? I don't think so. I mean, to think about being worried, like you're always worried. If you're a Michigan fan, what about this? What about that? This is the least I have been worried, and I'll worry about things. I'm not like some kind of chronic worrier. Like, just like coaches say, very rarely do you see some, perfect game. And if college football fans and Michigan fans, there's always going to be something. And I know people focused in on the quarter. Look at me. I'm sitting here for 40 minutes talking about the quarterbacks, but is the offensive line? That Zach Zinter, who I think is the best offensive lineman for Michigan, got worked over on a particular play. There's a part of me that is glad that some of it, like two of Michigan's best players, like, I don't know, just Ronnie Bell, he dropped the ball too much. They say a drop rate. Am I worried about Ronnie Bell's hands? I'm not. I think Ronnie Bell, why is he dropping the ball? He drops it. Some players have a higher drop rates. If you see it when it really counts, you say, that was something in those first couple of games, that's there in the back of my mind. But I worried about with a game on the line in the fourth quarter when, Michigan is playing Iowa, if the game is in doubt in the fourth quarter, or certainly against Penn State or Michigan State or the final game. Am I worried about Ronnie Bell running over the middle and Michigan throwing the ball and he's going to drop it? I'm not worried about that. Am I worried that, somehow Zach Zinter is taking a step back and it is not as good as he has been ranked? I'm not worried about that either. Am I worried that Michigan can lull themselves to sleep a little bit because everybody's patting them on the back? I don't know. I thought Harbaugh, I listened to his in-house pod. I don't know if he did it yesterday or the day before. He did it this week, talking with John Jansen. And you just listen to him. Harbaugh's pretty good at getting his team motivated, the pace that he puts them through in practice, how to keep his team hungry. He's good at that. If we're going to look at him honestly, I forgot who made the point about the quarterback, the history of the quarterbacks while Harbaugh's been the coach at Michigan. That is fair, talking about him picking this guy or that guy or not having the lock. It's obvious. Harbaugh's good at getting his guys ready and in the particulars about being a well-coached team. So I feel pretty good about that. The worried part. Otis says Harbaugh wanted to get the public and the team behind McCarthy starting. It was brilliant. I'm sure he saw what McCarthy did against Georgia last year and saw what McNamara did against Georgia. Yeah. Oh, is there part of it? I think the team and specifically Harbaugh. Like, if you took 100 Michigan fans, just what they have seen from these two quarterbacks, and I think there were more Michigan fans that thought McCarthy, brings this different element. McCarthy's probably a better quarterback. The case for Cade was that, and we've stated it now a few times, that he had his success last year. And so you just keep that rolling. And the case for McCarthy is that you think he's, more skilled. Now, there have been cases where you think guys are more skilled and then it just doesn't work out. But, and then you have to add in the combination of things that, his high school press clippings play into it. Like, there were some services that watched McCarthy play and thought this was one of the best prospects in college football. That plays into it, your reputation. But then also just what you have seen, like you're talking about the Georgia game. Yeah, there were some throws in the Georgia game. There's just some wow. There's the wow factor to JJ that we've talked about. Brando says that Nicole Auerbach is wrong. Cade had every opportunity to prove himself, and he didn't perform. Watch the film. People need to stop with the conspiracy stuff. Well, I don't even know if Nicole Auerbach's coming up with a conspiracy. She's just coming out with an opinion. And I don't think the opinion is conspiratorial, Brando. For people that might be just joining us, she's got an opinion. And she said the only reason Harbaugh did what he did was to set up JJ to win the job. Even if that is the case, okay. That doesn't mean he's a bad guy or did Cade dirty or anything like that. Doing it and going into the season, if he thought, okay, everybody, if whatever his intentions were, I believe his intentions were, this thing is really close. Do I think that Harbaugh thought that McCarthy gives Michigan a better chance to win? I do think that. And do I also think it lined up because they have these 3 games and he could go with the 2-game experiment and they could put it on display? And then the guy that performs the best in these 2 games, is going to win the job. And did he suspect it very well could be McCarthy? I do think that. But like it has been pointed out, there is easily a world where Cade came out there and performed well. If he was zipping the ball around like we heard some in practice and was really, and Harbaugh even said he's a better passer. Well, if he would have went out there and passed well and performed well against 2 really easy opponents, it would have made the job pretty tough. And then McCarthy, if he would have come out and been a little bit high in a couple throws, and not just take off, weaving through everybody and everything else, there was a chance it could have been Cade. Got an inside source texting me. Let's see what it says. Somebody saying, I'm all over Bob Segar for game captain. It's going to happen. Bob Segar down on Main Street. Let's see. There's a picture of Harbaugh and Bob coming in. Do people, let's get a little take a Bob Segar from the folks. I'm 52, but you know what I recall about growing up in Detroit, getting a radio when I was like 8 or 9 years old, or being able to listen to my own music. I listened to what they call classic rock. From the time I got that radio, like at 8 or 9 years old, up until I think I was like 21, I would have said, Bob Segar is boring. Boring Bob. I've heard enough of Bob Seger. It's all I hear is Bob Seger. Every time I turn on the radio, it's Bob Seger. And then I went to a party that was out on the island in Lake St. Clair. I don't exactly know what the island is called, but it was from, we went to Elginak, and then we stayed the night on this island. And on that island, in the middle of the night, we're out there around a fire or whatever, and some dude pulls out a guitar. And he starts singing Bob Seger. Down on Main Street, he starts going through it. I'm like, this is the greatest performance. He had a couple Bob Seger songs that he went through. That was his thing. That was his wheelhouse. And it was great. And then my uncle, who passed away a year or two after that, we were in his garage, and up on his refrigerator, he had all Bob Seger songs, tapes, cassette tapes, and he would play them. And then, they played all the Bob Seger and all those songs that I said I hated and that I didn't like Bob Seger from, growing up. Here was my uncle, Bob, by the way. We're listening to it, and I'm like, I love Bob Seger. But now, that's me, and I'm like relatively old now. Be interested to see if everybody else, but people don't know Bob Seger. They'll give him a nice round of applause, right? Let's and I'll read some more feedback, but let's get to what's next. The Wednesday window watching, let's call it, here on this Wednesday, September the 14th, with it 77 degrees outside. Michigan will take on UConn at noon. So we're all set, locked, and loaded for Michigan against UConn at noon. Michigan played Colorado State at noon. Then they played the late night game against Hawaii, all set for that window at noon. At 3:30, we have Penn State and Auburn. I also think we have what is being called the NIL Bowl with Texas A&M and Miami playing. You might want to tune into the NIL Bowl. But for me, with Penn State being on Michigan's schedule, give me UConn and Michigan. I'm sorry, give me Penn State at Auburn. And then the late window is Michigan State at Washington, 7 o'clock. That's how it's going to play out for me coming up on Saturday. And since I talked about myself earlier, just for a second, I'm going to do it again. 4 or 5 years ago, I looked to the future Michigan schedule, and I said, Washington, Seattle, Michigan at Seattle. That's a game I want to stash a little cash away for. It's a game that I want to go out there and get out on a boat in a tailgate. That's a game that I want to go to as a fan. And I did stash away a little cash, but then the pandemic came and they canceled that game. It didn't happen for me. I don't know what I did with the money that I had stashed. Probably spent it on beer. I mean, a present for my wife. Now Michigan State gets to go out there, and I went to the Friday night, September the 2nd, annual Michigan State opener over a friend of mine's house. Big Michigan State fan there. We sat out on the deck, and not everybody was a Michigan State fan there. I thought Western had a chance to beat them. But at one point, and I didn't know this was happening, came out and said he was going to Seattle, a bunch of his friends from when he was at Michigan State, and he was a swimmer. They pick a game every other year, and they all head out and hang out on the road. They get an Airbnb or a hotel, whatever else, and they're doing it up. He talked about This is the part that did me, that hit me. He said, "We got a boat. We're going to be out sailgating beforehand. It's going to be a big party." And I sat there and I was jealous, envious of my friend being able to go out there. But that's the slate. Michigan, Penn State, Auburn, and then MSU at Washington. All right. What else? We are on to Jaydn Davis. We'll get to that in a point. First, I want to tell everybody about one of our the podcast and the VCasts are really coming in and lining up on the Maize and Blue review. We got all kinds. If you've been following the channel, you see it. You're probably like, you go on, you're like, hey, there's another podcast. There's another podcast. Well, we have you want to call it a gambling podcast? We call it Sharpening the Edge. The Maize and Blue review, Sharpening the Edge podcast. It comes your way Fridays right here. And make sure you're checking that one out. Get you all ready. I make my picks. I tell you, I picked it. Here's another story time for you. I was going to make the Eagles minus 4.5 my pick of the week. And I said, you know what I like better? Miami, which ended up being a winner for my lock of the week. But I almost went with the Lions. But I was on one of the gambling sites, and they give you, if you sign up, some free bets. In one of those free bets, my wife was there, and she said, well, do you want to really bet against the Lions? Let's just bet on the Lions, so you can root for the Lions. It's free anyways. She talked me into it. Okay, let's just do it. And even though I thought that was one of my top picks of the week was the Eagles. And on the Sharpening the Edge pod, I actually picked the Eagles. But after that, with my wife talking me into it, I picked the Lions. And we all know what happened. The Lions came out on the first drive, and they looked like they were going to the Super Bowl. Let's be honest. DeAndre Swift running up the sideline. You had, Goff looking good. And, I got my friend calling me, this year's different. They do have that grit. Dan Campbell. I said, I gave him let's tap the brakes for a second here. It's only the first drive. No, it's different. But he was using all of the Rodrigo. Everybody was so jacked up because of Hard Knocks. I watched it myself. I wanted a mic on Deuce Staley. Aaron Glenn, I'm a huge fan of, and even I liked it before. Everybody, the Lions were so much fun on Hard Knocks. And then in the first drive, they look like world beaters. Then they're getting smashed. They can't tackle. Aiden Hutchinson's getting into the backfield, but he can't get to, he could pressure him, but he couldn't get Jalen Hurts on the ground. Nobody could. A.J. Brown. And the rest. It looked like the Eagles were killing them. It looked like, man, the Lions was one of the stupidest things. But then the Lions, just like last year, where they covered 11 out of their 17 games. Pretty good. A backdoor cover by the Lions. Great job by them. Okay. Can Michigan land Jaydn Davis? This gets us to a few things that you need to think about if you're a Michigan fan. Let's keep that little picture of Jaydn Davis. There he is. It is my favorite picture. I haven't seen him play. I haven't watched tape of him, but I have looked at the rankings. And he would be the highest rated Michigan commit at quarterback since Drew Henson. Amazing. Very highly thought of. But this is just where you sit, and this adds into where Michigan is sitting right now with their football program. This is the best Michigan has been sitting as a program. I'll say, so, when Harbaugh came in for the first year and it, had been so bad with the Hulk being over his head and Rich Rodriguez not being a good fit. What was that? A span of let's see. So that would have been 2008. So 3 years, and for 7-8 years. the big time decline for Michigan, but it was the best spot that Michigan was sitting, certainly since the Card years. I mean, I say since 98, 2000, when Drew Henson was the starter, but then got hurt. The possibility of Henson coming back in 2001. So it's really, in the 21st century, this is the best spot Michigan has been in as a program where you feel like they could take a tick up. And, for years, we would argue, some people would say Michigan's an elite football program, and you could make a case for it. Saying previous to 2008, you could make a case for it. Not so much after that. And people, no, that, and there was an argument for no. And I thought just outside knocking on the door to be an elite football program, that's where I thought they were. Right outside the top 10 or right at 10, wherever they're at. Not a bad place to be, but, if you're at 10, you want to be at 5. And if you're at 5, you want to be number 1. If you're a Michigan fan, you're at 10, you want to be number 1. But right now, if you just think about it for a second, and I mentioned Dabo Swinney earlier. Dabo Swinney was able to get Deshaun Watson. He said, this guy's the Michael Jordan of college football. This was before, the masseuse game and everything. The masseuse stuff came out there. But Deshaun Watson, and then followed it up with Trevor Lawrence. You see the recruiting of quarterbacks for Ohio State, for Alabama. With what Michigan has right now, the team that they have, the schedule that they have, and with J.J. McCarthy starting certainly this year and next year, and maybe the following years, maybe 3 years. I don't know how much you have thought about it, of J.J. McCarthy being the starter for 3 years for Michigan. But if you pause just for a second and think about the possibilities and what that could do for you, if you are a Michigan fan, you probably thought about it a little bit. It's fun to think about. But then you think about, what can Michigan do to bump it up? And we've always talked about, like last year, they finished top 10 in recruiting, according to Rivals. And you think it was before name, image, and likeness, or right at the start of name, image, and likeness. If Michigan can now go out there and use name, image, and likeness to their advantage, can they get a top 5 class? Remember how we talked about the bump in recruiting is going to come for beating Ohio State and winning the Big Ten and getting to the college football playoff. It wasn't going to be next year. It was going to be in the ensuing years, this year. And Michigan hasn't got that yet. But if they could, this is why Davis is so important. It is the most important position. Michigan's got it going right now. What they could have with name, image, and likeness, what they could do for the program, it feels like, because it does unlock everything. He's got a couple teammates that he plays with that could be following him or being right, however you want to look at it, right in there with him. When you say this could unlock things, it really could unlock things. What it would certainly unlock is that the conversation about Michigan just can't be a player for big time recruits because of their approach with name, image, and likeness, squashed after we're able to get Davis. This would open up the floodgates. Now, maybe he would just be a one-off, like, the kid doesn't really care about money or whatever. But it's huge, and it's definitely something to think about where Michigan is and what could happen. All right. I'm looking through the feedback, and what happens if I start talking about QBs, and this is a good problem to have. When I first started out this pod, I'd only get 5-10 messages per show. Now we have hundreds. And the only problem about that is I just can't get everybody up there and comment on every single message. And it is difficult. No, it's not that difficult. Let's make it sound like I'll give you difficult talking and then trying to get all the messages up. And then if I get repeat ones, I'm trying to get it for people that are watching. That's an aside. Let me just tell you that coming up tomorrow, excited about Jim Scarcelli, the former Wolverine, joining us. Scar knew it all along this summer. He said, I really want to diagram plays. So then Scar figured out how to diagram plays. But then he was like, I want to diagram. He went on and he did diagram plays, but then he didn't have the greatest software for it. And he said, I gotta get better software. Scar was out there grinding. I got a text from him yesterday. He's unlocked a software program that he likes that is going to be more visually appealing for the consumer. That's you. And so I'm teasing it. I'm looking forward to it. And I hope you'll check it out tomorrow. And as I'm saying that, I got a text in from old Scar here. How about that? And I got a former, speaking of thoughts and messages, this comes from a former Michigan player. Harbaugh handled the quarterback right. It created competition and was fair and balanced. Remember, Cade is one injury away from starting. Either way, I'm happy with how it was revolved. Just saying. Former Michigan player. Must be watching the show. What's up? You ever have any ideas what you'd want to see more? How you want to get on? Any of those kind of things? Leave me a message. I'm on Twitter. There's my Twitter handle, @DennisFithian. We have been using Twitter Spaces now. And the ability to go on there, and if you're somebody that likes to leave a message, if you like to talk, join Twitter. If you like to talk, it's the way you can get the audio going and bring it on a show like this. It works. I've only tried it a time or two, but it's fun. It's exciting. It works. And all of that. So things are going pretty good for Michigan. This is a good team. This is a team that is well coached. This is a team that's got a lot of talent. This is a team that's got a real advantageous schedule. And this is a team that's got a quarterback that's starting now. However you thought about the competition, if you think it's more high risk, high reward, I get that. That could be true, actually. I like the opportunity now to, and here's the, I said I was going to get to this, and here I am at the end, going on and on and on. Jim Harbaugh was on the Rich Eisen show this week, and Eisen asked Harbaugh about rotating quarterbacks. Here's the audio.
And do you plan on doing this week to week for long, Jim, or are you going to name one and just rip the knob off and say, let's go into, say, the Big Ten schedule, or potentially November, knowing who's what, and hopefully you get to play deep into January?
No, it's JJ's. That we named JJ the starter, and from there we do exactly what we said. Well, one play at a time, one game at a time. That's the best approach.
All right. Celebrate, Michigan fans. Go crazy, Michigan fans. If you are a Michigan fan and all off season, you're grinding your teeth, thinking about what's he going to do? How's he going to let this play out? Who's going to get a fair chance? Everything. And then you thought, and this was part of the conversation, Harbaugh, and this was in the realm of possibilities, that Cade McNamara was going to be the starter from game 1, game 2, and then he played decent enough to just continue on, and he was going to be the starter. And then with that, Harbaugh continued the McCarthy plan, getting him in the game at, to be odd, spots, getting him in a series here, but then doing it even more than he did last year. Maybe even making it close to a true rotation. I thought that would have been disastrous. I've been over that, and however you think about it, I did not like the idea of Cade McNamara and J.J. McCarthy doing some kind of series for series, or Cade plays the first. Here comes for a series for McCarthy. Here's McCarthy for 2 plays in the third. No. It's never worked in the history of college football. They don't do it in the pros ever. You understood why Michigan did it last year with JJ because, he's super talented. But then came the opener and afterwards, and Cade was bummed. We all understand that. In fact, I sat around for an hour today talking about it. But Cade, after the game, said Harbaugh had told the quarterbacks that they weren't doing the switcheroo this year, that they were just going with one guy. Ooh, very smart if Harbaugh said that. Is it true? And what I heard right there on that Rich Eisen show, Harbaugh could have said when it came down to the plan, he could have said, we're going to do a little bit like we did last year. Doesn't sound like that. No, you could hear it. Jim Harbaugh is going with J.J. McCarthy as the starter. Now, maybe you get into whatever it is. I like to see J.J. McCarthy all the time now, and until the games, Michigan's up by 40. You want to put some other guys in? Fine. Getting experience for backups is helpful in easy games. But now Michigan has had their easy game against Colorado State. They've had their easy game against Hawaii. They got to get ready for the Big Ten. So most of the starters are going to play into the second half. This is like the old dress rehearsal. Saturday's the dress rehearsal. But that's got to be music to your ears if you're a Michigan fan. That Jim Harbaugh, whether you liked, whether you think that, he wanted, however you feel about it, he's got his guy now, and he's not playing around with any rotations, switcheroos. He's going with one guy, as he should. You got to be jacked if you're a Michigan fan. And you didn't know it for sure, but then you heard it last week. You heard it after the opener. McCarthy was asked about it, and he said, I like that idea. You didn't hear anything what Cade had to say, but he liked the idea. It was even before he was named starter for the rest of the year. Even though Harbaugh, that was very much a coach, being a coach, talking about one play, one series at a time. Yeah, I'm taking it 1 hour at a time, 1 day at a time, all of that. But, it just boosts you up again if you're a Michigan fan and where you're sitting. Michigan is going with J.J. McCarthy, and he is their starter. They're not going to any switcheroos. He's the guy. And it's another reason to sit back and feel like, Michigan is just in a really good spot right now. They've got their guy. They've got the plan. It's a plan everyone can get behind. I don't think anybody's coming out saying, I really hope that Harbaugh, gives McNamara a series out of the blue against Iowa. Nobody's saying that. It's nice to have in your back pocket an experienced quarterback. If you need a spark or if there's an injury, obviously. Or as the young, my daughters, I was going to say young kids. My daughter says sometimes, she's not so young anymore, Avi. Obviously, it helps to have experience in a number two that you could feel pretty good about if needed. Break glass in case of emergency. But going with one is the way to go. So right now, Michigan's sitting in a really good place. I'm going to say it probably how many times you can go over this tape. I think this is the 5th time. Michigan is sitting in a really good place with their quarterback, with their team, both sides of the ball, all 3 phases of the game. Coaching staff looks good. The recruiting side we touched on. It could be it could really open things up if they get the NIL right, if they get Jaydn Davis. Those are all things. Everything is on the table right now and is doable. This is why things are you should feel really good if you're a Michigan fan. Everything is doable right now. The talk about bumping up and being able to get in with the big boys, beating Ohio State in back-to-back years, winning on the road at Ohio State, going to the Big Ten championship game again, going to the college football playoff again, winning in the college football playoff, winning it all, recruiting another 5-star, keeping this thing going, taking a jump up in how the overall program is. It's all on the table, and it's at least reasonable. We're all making our predictions. That's never going to happen. Oh, yeah. Possibility. And they're in a good spot with it. They're in a spot that almost every team in the country would want to be. Sitting pretty, a lot of talent, good coach, everything else that you want. NIL, we don't know. Still the mystery. But tremendous schedule. I mean, what are we talking about here, folks? It's a good time to do a Michigan podcast. That's what I'm going to say to you. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. We will be back with you at 1 o'clock tomorrow. We're here live weekdays at 1, talking about the latest in Michigan sports. Thanks so much for everyone for the feedback. And until tomorrow,